This fearless man, holding a large saber, walks alone in a dark pool. Suddenly, it turns out to be the nine-headed Hydra. The fearless man swings his saber, cutting off one serpent head with each strike. Immediately after, he runs to the North Pole to challenge the dominant Boar King. The two charge towards each other at high speed. The Boar King thinks the man wants to confront him head-on. Unexpectedly, the clever man steps onto a nearby tree. The Boar King directly knocks down the tree, and the man on top spins and leaps, swinging his meteor hammer at the boar. Not having had enough, the man then goes to the lair of the Nemean lion, the king of all beasts. However, this lion is no easy opponent. Its tough outer skin is impenetrable to swords and spears. Even arrows can't harm it. The enraged lion pounces at the man in an instant, but the man finally, relying on his divine power, forcibly tears open the lion's mouth with his bare hands. The reason why this man is so powerful is that he is a bastard son of Zeus, the king of the Greek gods, and a mortal woman on earth, named Hercules. As a demigod, he could catch snakes with his bare hands at the age of 2. When he grows up, he becomes even more extraordinary. With his divine power, he eliminates evils for the people, winning the love of royal ministers and the admiration of countless people outside the kingdom. He also has 3 children and a virtuous wife. At that time, Hercules was truly a successful man, but his great achievements aroused the jealousy of his king. At the celebration banquet, the king knocked Hercules unconscious, then secretly released a vicious wolf, which killed Hercules' children and wife. When he woke up, Hercules found his hands covered in blood and thought he had accidentally killed his family while drunk. This filled him with endless guilt, making him never able to forgive himself. The king took this as a reason to expel Hercules from Athens forever. Since then, exiled, Hercules had to live the life of a bounty hunter, risking his life at every turn. One night, his nephew was hoisted high by pirates, who were about to torture him. Just as the pirates lit the rope, a tall figure suddenly appeared in the distance. Looking closer, it was Hercules wearing a lion's head. The pirate leader, seeing he was alone, sent 5 men to teach him a lesson, but Hercules knocked them all down with one hammer blow. Seeing this, the leader ordered all pirates to attack him, but Hercules walked unhurriedly. Because he wasn't the only one coming, his companions were with him. In less than a minute, all the pirates were wiped out by them. Here, the nephew thought he was about to meet a tragic end, but Hercules walked over unhurriedly. While they were enjoying the celebration banquet, suddenly, a woman named Ergenia from a neighboring kingdom found Hercules. She claimed that her kingdom was being invaded and wanted to ask Hercules to save their kingdom, with a high reward after the success. Although mercenaries fight for money, as the leader of the team, Hercules needed to think carefully. At this moment, his nephew Iolaus saw the shield in the hand of Ergenia's soldier, and suddenly remembered the puzzling words the prophet had said the night before.
A lion and a crow and strange alliance fighting across a sea of corpses.
Hercules' cloak was made of lion skin, and the soldier's shield had a crow pattern. Could this mission be a bloodbath? In Ergenia's expectant eyes, Hercules agreed to take the job because if they succeeded this time, each member of the team would get a share of gold, so they wouldn't have to wander around anymore. Thus, the mercenary team followed Ergenia to the kingdom of Thrace in eastern Greece. While waiting for the king's audience, Hercules and his companions saw a huge statue of Hera and a temple. Ergenia told them that Hera was the patron saint of the kingdom of Thrace, so the country had spent a lot of manpower and material resources on this statue. As they were talking, Arius ran out. After a brief hug, the little boy turned his attention to Hercules. Even Hercules himself didn't expect that the story of the son of Zeus would earn him a young fan. Listening to her son talking endlessly about Hercules' deeds, Ergenia seemed to be worried about something, and quickly interrupted to pull him away. At that moment, the general who had been in charge of delivering messages came out and led Hercules and his group into the palace. To show his attention, the king of Thrace even came down from his throne to greet them. From his words, it was obvious that the king was also a loyal fan of the story of the son of Zeus. After some polite remarks, Hercules introduced his team members to the king, but when he saw there was a woman in the team, the king suddenly showed his chauvinism and expressed his shallow view. "I'm worried that the upcoming mission may not be suitable for a woman, even if she is an Amazon warrior." The female warrior, having never been so belittled, immediately showed off her skills in front of him, afraid that he would be the next target. The king apologized as quickly as possible. After confirming he had found the right people, the king introduced the country's situation and the mission of Hercules and his group while eating. The one who launched the rebellion was a wizard named Reesus, who was good at using spells to confuse people's minds. Reesus led a group of half-human, half-horse monsters, burning, killing, and looting everywhere, doing all kinds of evil, trying to seize the country's power and take the throne. People who lost their homes had nowhere to go and could only seek refuge from the king. It was said that only a god could kill Reesus, so the king found Hercules, hoping he could help his country. Hearing that their opponent this time was a wizard with a group of half-human, half-horse monsters, Hercules somewhat regretted agreeing. Seeing this, the king immediately signaled Erginia to say some good words. "I've seen too much reality to believe in legends anymore, but people need a hero, someone to look up to. My son believes you will bring us peace, and I will too." Having fought for money for so many years, he had never heard anyone affirm him so much. Coupled with Erginia's expectant eyes, Hercules was deeply moved and immediately agreed. But he wasn't carried away by these words. Feelings were feelings, and business was business. He agreed to help the king deal with the wizard Reesus, but the previously promised gold should be doubled. The team members were excited to hear the news, but soon they faced their first problem: how to improve the army's combat effectiveness. Because before this, the king had fought with Reesus many times, but the opponent was so strong that the king's army lost many soldiers. Now the army was a motley crew, with farmers and merchants, but few formal soldiers. After thinking about it, Hercules decided to start from the reality and build a decent army. So the next day, he and his teammates began to teach the soldiers how to enhance the power of the shield formation. But sometimes things change unpredictably. Just a few days after the army started training, the spy brought news to the king that Reesus was about to attack the nearby Bessie tribe, and according to the marching speed, they would arrive in as soon as 6 days. Once the Bessie tribe fell, the kingdom of Thrace would be completely surrounded. To protect his people, the king decided to send troops to intercept Reesus' army. Hercules thought this was inappropriate. After all, the army had just started training, and taking action at this time had little chance of winning, and might even result in the entire army being wiped out. The king knew this well, but at this point, he had no choice but to send troops. So he immediately ordered the general to assemble the troops and set off early the next morning. Seeing the king's benevolence, Hercules decided to do his best to help him. Seeing Erginia treating the wounded in the refugee area at night, Hercules was filled with mixed emotions. If that incident hadn't happened, he would also have a virtuous wife and a group of lovely children. Erginia saw that Hercules was deep in thought and offered to help him share his troubles, but Hercules refused. The next day, when the army assembled, Hercules found Iolaus mixed in the army. Considering that the odds of winning this battle were slim, he ignored Iolaus' pleas and resolutely pulled him out of the team and sent him to the king's side, because that was the safest place. Then Hercules began to boost the morale of the army. The shield wall is your home, your shelter when you sleep. When you fight, the shield wall is your quilt. The shield wall is your armor. As long as you have a breath left, the shield wall will never collapse. Remember these words, and you will taste the joy of victory. After saying these words, the army set off in a mighty manner. No one knew the outcome of this battle. The only thing to do was to give it their all. The army marched day and night toward the Bessie tribe. But even so, by the time they arrived, the tribe had already been massacred by Reesus. Looking at the severed heads impaled on stakes, even Hercules and his men, who were accustomed to death, couldn't help but sigh in their hearts that the enemy were beasts. As the army entered the tribe, everyone saw more and more corpses. It seemed Reesus had detected that there was a spy among his ranks, so he'd advanced his timeline. Unexpectedly, at that moment, 2 bodies lying on the ground suddenly revived and attacked Iolaus and the general. Though terrifying to look at, they were eventually dealt with one by one, but things were far from over. As more and more people crawled out of the ground, Hercules realized they'd fallen into Reesus' trap. What confused him was, the army had come to aid the Bessie tribe, so why were the tribespeople retaliating with such malice? The experienced general explained that this was one of Reesus' usual tactics. Legend had it his magic could bewitch minds, turning allies against each other. Since they'd already arrived, there was no turning back without a fight. Just as Hercules ordered the army to prepare for battle, the leader of the Bessie tribe emerged, waving his scimitar. He seemed to be declaring his fearlessness. Hercules, undaunted, slowly draped his lion pelt cloak over his shoulders and stood his ground, waiting for the right moment. The giant let out a roar and swung at Hercules, the son of Zeus. But in the next second, Hercules punched him, sending him flying. He was dead before he hit the ground. The scene left everyone stunned. The Thracian soldiers were the first to react. Gasping at Hercules' divine strength, Morale soared instantly, yet the truth was, it wasn't raw strength that killed the tribal leader, but an arrowhead Hercules had hidden in his hand beforehand. Seeing their leader killed by the enemy, the other tribespeople refused to back down, vowing to tear Hercules and his men to pieces. With a showdown inevitable, Hercules ordered the soldiers to form a formation. Soon, a rectangular phalanx of shields took shape, facing the charging tribespeople. The entire team fought with all their might, but the soldiers were too inexperienced. What was once a multi-layered shield wall was shattered by the tribespeople's onslaught. Trapped in the center, the king began to regret ignoring Hercules' advice, dragging untrained soldiers into battle. But regret came too late. A gap quickly appeared in the shield wall, and a Bessie tribesman wielding a scimitar charged straight for the king. In the nick of time, Hercules arrived on a chariot, eliminating the attacking Bessie tribesmen centered around the king's position. The prophet, seeing this, also found a chariot and activated the blades mounted on it. Everywhere it went, enemies fell. This unexpected maneuver turned the tide of the battle. The surviving Bessie tribespeople, unwilling to die for nothing, fled into the depths of the forest. The king called off his exhausted army. Though they'd won the battle, the bodies strewn across the ground showed the king's side had paid a heavy price. Most crucially, they hadn't laid eyes on Reesus once. Later, during a post-battle review, he summoned Hercules. He'd expected comfort, but instead, Hercules launched into a tirade of criticism. Hercules stated, "I warned you, your men are brave, but untrained and lacking combat experience. They need time. I can forge them into warriors." With Reesus still at large, the king swallowed his anger and agreed to let Hercules continue training his soldiers. Night soon fell, and Erginia arrived at the camp with the medical team. She first checked on Hercules, who had only minor injuries. If she'd come later, his wounds might have already healed. During their chat, Erginia mentioned her late husband, saying he, like Hercules, was stubborn and conservative in some ways. Tragically, he died before their child was born. Perhaps thinking of his own absent father, Hercules spoke a rare few words, but his expression darkened when Erginia mentioned children. Sensing his silence, Erginia awkwardly stood to leave. Hercules avoided the topic because his wife and children had died at his own hands, and he'd lived in that shadow ever since. 3 years earlier, Hercules, living in Athens, had received orders from the king to eliminate the 9-headed Hydra with his team. Upon arrival, they discovered the Hydra was just men in disguise, but it didn't matter. The king only wanted peace of mind. After completing the mission, Hercules returned to Athens, where he was warmly celebrated by the people. Everyone revered him as a god, believing his presence guaranteed their peaceful lives. Listening to the cheers and watching his wife and children behind him, Hercules felt deeply content. But one day, this life shattered. Hercules woke from a drunken stupor to find his wife and children covered in blood, dead on the floor and his own hands stained red. The king of Athens declared him a bloodthirsty fiend, lost to madness, and exiled him. Since then, Hercules and his team had lived as mercenaries, fighting for gold. Beneath his imposing exterior, he was tormented. For 3 years, every time he slept, he saw his family's bloodied bodies. Worse, a 3-headed hellhound appeared in his dreams. Gnawing at their corpses, Hercules flew into a rage, but the hound vanished as soon as he fought back. Tormented by reality, dreams, and hallucinations, he often woke in the middle of the night. The next day, noticing his state, the prophet guessed he'd had another nightmare. As a seer with the power to foresee the future, the prophet believed Hercules' dreams were divine messages. Only by completing the trials set by Hera and the gods could his soul find peace. His final trial? Confronting the fear in his heart, the prophet added, "From personal experience, no matter how far or fast you run, that beast will catch up. No one escapes their fate." Easy to say, hard to do. To face his family's death calmly, Hercules needed immense strength of will, something he lacked. So he threw himself into training the army. By improving their weapons and drilling day and night in combat and archery, Hercules and his team accomplished this daunting task. As the ragtag group transformed into a proper army, spies brought the king updates on Reesus. The wizard had set up camp 200 miles away. Hercules deduced Reesus planned to cross Mount Asticus on the border and attack Thrace's castle directly. The only way to stop him was to cut through the forest and intercept. With the king's approval, Hercules asked the prophet if he could foresee victory. The prophet admitted the gods remained silent, but revealed he would die within the week in a hellish place. Yet for a messenger between gods and humans, death was sometimes not an end, but a new beginning. So after hearing Hercules' plan, the prophet joined the mission without hesitation. Meanwhile, the The shield wall's power had improved drastically through relentless practice. Victory now seemed likely. Led by Hercules, the soldiers traveled light through the forest toward Reesus' camp. Hercules had deliberately scrapped horses from the plan. Their movement would be too conspicuous, but luck was against them. Shortly after exiting the forest, they were spotted by Reesus' men. Everyone stared in disbelief at the centaurs on the distant cliff. No one had seen such an unnatural fusion before. As they gaped, a centaur blew a horn, and Reesus' army surged from their ambush below the slope. The centaurs then revealed their trick: riders on horseback, using optics to create an illusion, like Iolaus' stories. It was all smoke and mirrors to intimidate. As they spoke, the centaur squad approached the king. After locking eyes with Hercules, the leader removed his helmet. It was Reesus himself. Confident in his own prowess, Reesus had taken on the role of messenger to negotiate with the Thracian king, but he wasn't there to impeach. He wanted the king to surrender early and stop putting up meaningless resistance. Yet the king wasn't one to back down easily. With just a few words, he retorted sharply at Reesus. Seeing this, both sides declared they'd settle it on the battlefield. War was imminent. Hercules gave another pre-battle speech. This moment, on this special day, be the warrior worthy of respect. Within you lies the power to write your own legend. Let it bear witness to either death or victory. Then, at Reesus' command, his cavalry charged forward. Hercules immediately ordered his soldiers to raise their shields. Outnumbered 3-1, head-on combat was unwise. Adaptability was key. As the enemy cavalry reached the designated position, Hercules gave the signal. In the next second, the archery squad led by the female warrior, hidden in the forest on the side, charged out on chariots. With pinpoint accuracy, they shot down the leading enemy cavalry one after another. For those who dodged the arrows, Hercules had a backup plan, besides joining the fray himself. The first row of soldiers in the shield formation raised their spears at a 45-degree angle to take down the oncoming cavalry. But that wasn't all. Inside the shield formation, Hercules had stationed a group of archers. Thanks to these flexible arrangements, the king's army not only successfully blocked the enemy's attack but also wiped them out entirely, watching their impenetrable defense while his own soldiers fell like cannon fodder. Reesus, in charge of command, flew into a rage and ordered the launch of fire arrows. Hercules shouted for the shield formation to adjust direction and protect the king. Faced with a rain of arrows, everyone scrambled for cover. Everyone except the prophet. He put down his weapon and opened his arms calmly to meet the flying fire arrows. Unexpectedly, the arrows seemed to have eyes, magically bypassing him without exception. Witnessing this, the prophet instantly realized today wasn't his day to die. He quickly picked up his weapon and rejoined the fight. Seeing the shield formation block his fire arrows and drive back his soldiers, Reesus could no longer sit still. Well versed in military strategy, he knew to capture the enemy, first capture their leader. He put on his helmet and charged forward, but Hercules wasn't intimidated. As Reesus drew near, he timed his dodge perfectly, toppling Reesus and his horse to the ground. The battle finally ended with Reesus captured alive. The biggest winner was undoubtedly the king of Thrace. He won victory without issuing a single order and earned the cheers of the people. As Reesus and the prisoners entered the city, commoners and soldiers pelted them with objects. The most excessive was the king's general, who kicked the bound Reesus repeatedly while hurling insults. Hercules, unable to watch, stepped forward to stop the general and helped Reesus up. Seeing Hercules' integrity, nothing like the king's lackey, Reesus stated he hadn't burned down villages. He warned Hercules that aiding the king was a mistake and urged him not to be deceived. This only confused Hercules more, but he couldn't tell if Reesus was telling the truth. It wasn't until the victory banquet that night that he sensed something was wrong. To flaunt his victory, the king had Reesus tied up nearby, forcing him to watch the celebration. Midway through, Argenia, taking pity on Reesus, tried to give him some wine to quench his thirst, but the king stopped her. Then, at the king's signal, the general beside him suddenly stood up, picked up a prepared crown, and staged a dramatic coronation. The general praised the king for ruling Thrace, but Reesus countered, "Thrace belongs to no one, it belongs to all its people." It was hard to fathom such wisdom from a rebel. Deepening Hercules' doubts, his companions noticed his thoughts and warned him not to meddle, suggesting they take the gold and leave tomorrow. But that wasn't Hercules' style. Just then, Argenia suddenly left the table. Curious for answers, Hercules followed. He stopped her in a secluded spot and asked why she sympathized with Reesus, their father's enemy. Argenia didn't answer, but her evasive gaze told Hercules enough. The so-called rebellion was a lie fabricated by the king and Erginia was his accomplice. Hercules accused her of deception, but her reply was filled with helplessness. I didn't do this for my father, I did it for my son. If I defied the king, my son would be executed. I did what a mother must do, I protected my child. Erginia told Hercules she was once the queen of Thrace. Her husband, the rightful king, was poisoned by her father, who seized the throne. After her son was born, the king used him to threaten Erginia into obedience. As for the captured Reesus, he was the true righteous one. Another reason Erginia didn't rebel was her belief that her father, being old, would die someday, then her son would inherit the throne and become a just, people-loving king. But she forgot one thing: no one avoids the allure of kingship. If her father could seize power, others could too. By then, Arius might not even live to adulthood, let alone become king. As they discussed the truth, the general suddenly appeared from behind, saying the king summoned Hercules. Armed with the truth, Hercules was seething. He confronted the king, demanding to know why he'd lied. Hearing this, the king dropped all pretense. Even if I lied, what can you do about it? Worse, his next words enraged Hercules. We've all heard your legend, Hercules, but I have my own. When I was a general in Thrace's army, I dreamed of ruling this kingdom. Thanks to you, that dream has grown. Now, I crave an empire. My 1,000 soldiers will train 10,000, who'll train 100,000. If you fear the threat of such an army, lead it yourself. Already furious at being used and deceived, Hercules was further provoked by the king's mention of children. In his old temper, he would have erupted, but his companions, sensing danger, pulled him back. After all, they were still in the king's territory. A falling out could make escape impossible. Fortunately, the king didn't want to escalate things. Seeing Hercules refuse to submit, he ordered his men to pay the gold and let them leave. But as they prepared to depart, Hercules couldn't bear the hopeless looks of the refugees. In the end, he couldn't convince himself to leave. He decided to stay and atone for his mistakes. Grateful, most people chose to stay and help Hercules save Thrace. One man, however, insisted their job was done and it was time to take the gold and go. Hercules didn't press him. Everyone has their own path. The team shrank to 5, but their bond grew stronger. That night, Hercules and his group snuck into the palace, taking out the guards, but the king, anticipating their return, had laid an ambush. Hercules and the others were captured. Still dazed from an earlier blow, Hercules woke to see the 3-headed hellhound from his dreams. Upon closer inspection, he realized they were just 3 unusual wolves owned by the king of Athens, who'd exiled him. In that moment, Hercules remembered seeing these wolves at home when his wife and children died. With Hercules tied up, the Athenian king finally confessed the truth. 3 years ago, he'd spiked Hercules' wine, then released the wolves to kill his family while he was unconscious. He did it because he feared Hercules' popularity overshadowed his own. When people shout your name, hailing you as a god, how long before they call you their king? Hercules insisted he wanted nothing. The Athenian king retorted, your sin is your lack of ambition. I can handle a man with ambition, he can be bribed. But a man who wants nothing is dangerous. The situation was too delicate to kill Hercules outright, as it would spark outrage. So the king plotted to ruin his reputation and exile him. But he hadn't expected Hercules to survive exile and become a mercenary. He'd come here to ally with the Thracian king, conquer Greece, and finish Hercules once and for all. Learning the truth, Hercules broke down, crying out for his wife and children. The Thracian king smirked. No rush, I'll send you to join them. He moved to execute everyone, starting with his own daughter. Thanks to the general's betrayal, the king knew Erginia had told Hercules the truth. He'd taken her child and locked her with Hercules. Witnessing the king's cruelty, everyone panicked. Hercules, overwhelmed by the truth of his family's death, couldn't summon his strength. The prophet, seeing the moment, began to rally him. Guided by the prophet, Hercules found his resolve. He tore off his restraints and knocked away the descending axe. The Thracian king, terrified by his ferocity, ordered soldiers to unleash the 3 wolves. Rushing to save Erginia, Hercules was bitten on the arm and ankle by 2 wolves. The 2 kings, fearing collateral damage, locked themselves outside but stayed to watch. As Hercules fought the wolves, Erginia hurried to free the others. Without keys, she hacked at the locks. Watching the wolves cling to Hercules, everyone's hearts raced, but Hercules' strength prevailed. He hurled one wolf away, tore the jaw of another charging at him, and finally used a leftover lion's tooth to finish off the last tenacious wolf. By then, Erginia had opened the cell door. The Athenian king, livid at his precious dog's deaths, chose survival first. As the mercenary team emerged from the dungeon, the tide turned. Armed with weapons, they set out to confront the two colluding kings. They encountered a few soldiers along the way, easy targets, but as the saying goes, open spears are easy to dodge, hidden arrows hard to guard against. After Hercules dispatched the soldiers, the prophet spotted someone launching a fire arrow from afar. Instead of dodging, he closed his eyes, awaiting death. He'd foreseen being killed by a fire arrow, but he was wrong again. Hercules caught the arrow and hurled it back at the attacker. It seems that wherever Hercules is, the prophet can't die even if he wants to. Because the king of Athens had killed his wife and children, Hercules decided to settle accounts with him first. Although he had slipped away early, the king of Athens, not knowing his way around, was soon caught up by Hercules. Seeing that there was no way to escape, the king of Athens began to shift the blame to the king of Thrace, claiming that he had been bewitched into doing these foolish things. When this method didn't work, the king of Athens knelt down and begged for mercy, saying that as long as Hercules spared him, he was willing to pay enough gold. But these things were far less important to Hercules than his wife and children. He told the king of Athens that if he wanted to apologize, he must be sincere. Instead of begging for his forgiveness, he might as well apologize to his wife and children in person. So Hercules pulled out a knife and successfully sent the king of Athens to the other world. Unexpectedly, before he could catch his breath, a long whip suddenly flew from behind and dragged him down from the throne. The one who launched the sneak attack was none other than the general who had clashed with him before. Seeing Hercules fall to the ground, the general picked up his weapon and walked over, ready to finish him off. But he didn't expect Iolaus to sneak attack him from behind. Later, the uncle and nephew joined the others to look for their next target, the king of Thrace. When they arrived outside the palace, they found that the king of Thrace, though old, had a thick skin. He had even deployed his army. What was even more speechless was that he had taken Arius, his own grandson, as a hostage to negotiate with Hercules. However, upon seeing the army, Hercules had a plan. Thinking that the soldiers had all been trained by himself, he began to persuade everyone not to help the wrong person like he had done before. After speaking, the king had Arius brought up and started counting down from 3. Telling Hercules and the others to surrender voluntarily. But before he could finish counting to 3, the soldier holding Arius was killed. It was the companion who had left earlier who had returned. In order to rescue Arius, the two sides began to shoot at each other. The companion stepped forward to respond, was accidentally shot, and finally died from serious injuries. Seeing the soldiers approaching step by step under the king's orders, Hercules and the others had to overturn the brazier in front of the palace to temporarily block the soldiers' advance. The king didn't care about that and ordered the soldiers to charge forward, only to have them die in the fire. Soon he thought of another way, which was the shield formation designed by Hercules earlier. The shield formation was impenetrable and could change flexibly. With this method, the king slowly approached the few of them, spouting words to provoke Hercules, but he never expected that this action would speed up his own death. Watching his companion die in his arms, Hercules was filled with extreme anger. Looking up at the statue of Hera, he suddenly had a way to deal with the situation. He propped up the statue with both hands and pushed it out with all his strength. As the shield formation was disrupted, the king was hit by the head of the statue and died on the spot. After the stones stopped rolling, Hercules emerged from the dust. When the soldiers saw that he was extremely powerful and unharmed, they put down their weapons one after another and were willing to submit. At this moment, in their eyes, it no longer mattered whether Hercules was the son of Zeus. For the country and the people, all they needed was a hero to worship. And to become a hero, one didn't need the so-called status of a demigod, but only to believe in oneself. I'm a movie enthusiast. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.